In today's presentation, I'll be showing some examples on creating and manipulating code workbook templates. So hopefully it'll be useful information for people who never use templates, or a refresher for people who had exposure to code templates before, or who would like to use more of them or contribute more. And so this is roughly the outline. It's going to be mostly me running through practical examples, and we can go over any questions you might have, but I'll show you first how to create a code workbook template, and then how to import and use an existing template created by other people. And then we'll see how we can edit and reuse existing ones. We'll also talk about multi-node templates, which are a more complex form of code workbook templates. And then I'll show how to submit templates to the knowledge store for wider usage, and how to use existing knowledge store templates. And then I'll finish by reminding everyone where to find the documentation for this information. So let me go and create a workbook. So for people who are familiar, who are maybe new to Code Workbook supports R, Python, and SQL. And so it's basically a notebook where you can import data that exists in the enclave and then write code to apply transformations on the data and analyze it. Let me call this workbook example creation of templates. And I'm going to start with a basic template, which takes the concept set table with the domain table and does a basic filter to return some records of interest. So first, I'm going to import data sets. And this is obviously going to be based on notional SIMPAF data. So no DUR is required. I'm going to go to the data catalog and import first let me import the condition occurrence table, which is one of the domain tables that has conditions. That's a table of 14.8 million rows, and I'm going to import the data set that has the mapping between concept sets and their associated concepts. And so that's usually one of the ways to filter to the records of interest, is to define concept sets earlier on and then use them within code workbook or Contour. So in the data catalog, there's this collection called OMOP concepts, and the table is called concept set members. So this table is essentially, you'll see in the preview, a mapping between code set IDs, which represents concept sets, and their associated concepts in here. So I'm going to create a transformation. In this presentation, I'm going to use Python code, but everything I will say here is going to apply exactly the same way if you're using, for example, R. And so let me copy a code that I've written on the side to just kind of save some time. And then I'll explain what the code does before creating the template. So what this code does is that it takes a concept set members table and my domain table, in this case, condition occurrence. And then I'm inputting a concept set or a code set ID. This one is actually related to pneumonia condition. So my first step is to filter the concept set members table to the specific code set of interest. And that will give me the list of concept IDs that I will use to get the corresponding records from condition occurrence. So first I'm applying the filter on concept set members, then I'm doing a join with condition occurrence on this concept ID. So let me minimize this, and I'm just going to run a preview, but while it's running, I am going to start creating a template. And in my case here, what I would like to do is make this code generic enough so that one, it can be reused by myself or other people in different examples and circumstances, and two, make it such that this is kind of a hard-coded value. I want to have a template here that takes any concept set ID and returns the records of interests. So as you can see here, the preview just ran. So in order to create a template, on the right-hand side here, you click on Action, and then you click on Create Templates. And it will take you to this interface where basically on the left-hand side, you have your code. You also have the inputs, some of the inputs color-coded, because now they correspond to parameters that can change. And on the right-hand side is where you document what your template does and define the parameters that you want to use in this template. So as a title, I'm just going to write demo filter to code sets and join with domain table. And as you can see here, automatically recognize two of the parameters. The first one is concept set members, which is a data set. And the second one is condition occurrence, which is also a data set. But I want to add another parameter here, which is my code set ID. So in order to do that, I'm going to click add parameter, and let's give it a name such as input code set ID. So this is this is going to be my other parameter for this template. And right now I define this parameter, I need to refer to it in the code. And if I double click on the place where I want the variable, the hard-coded value to be replaced by that parameter, I can just double click and it will automatically replace that hard-coded variable with whatever value input concept code set ID is. So here I have different options for how to define the import parameters. In my case, this is a variable of type text, and I can choose to provide the default value of the parameter. And so once I've defined these three parameters, I can create my template, and it will be a new resource that I can save in. In my case, I'm saving it in this M3C training area folder just for the purposes of this demo. But in your case, it will probably be in one of your research projects, just like you would save a contour analysis or another data set or another code workbook. So I'm going to save the template in here. And now that I've saved it, as you can see, the view is not like a code editor anymore, but more like an interface in which you have you can enter parameters, and so you can enter different parameters and then rerun and get different results depending on the parameters. If you want to see what the underlying code is, you can click on toggle view, and it will tell you, it will show you what the code that is behind the template that I'm using. And so to illustrate this, let me create another workbook on the same folder. And let me try to import the template that I just created and see how it works. So let me call this workbook example usage of templates. And so what I'm going to do here is, let's start by adding a new transformation. And instead of choosing R, Python, or SQL, I'm going to choose templates. And it will give me this interface in which I can browse and look at all the existing templates, or I can make some of the templates favorites, so I'll be able to find them quickly. or I can use this search bar. So if I start typing in demo, as you can see here, this is the template that I just created, filter to code sets and join with domain table. Let me actually mark it here so that it's part of my favorite templates. If you click on details, if I was good, basically, if the template is good enough, it should have a description explaining what the template does and a more detailed description of the parameters. But this is what you see in this interface. It's the metadata about the templates, and you can click on apply transformation, and it will automatically import this template here, in which you can see that I have a default value, input code set ID, and then I need to add my concept set members table and my condition occurrence table. So let me add them by importing them to this workbook so that I'll be able to rerun my template. So the concept set members is in the OMOP code sets collection. And then I'm going to add my condition occurrence table from the SIMPOF synthetic data collection. So now that I added these two tables, I can click on the interface of this template. And then here it says, click here to add data sets. So I can click and then point to this concept set members, and it automatically added it. Same thing for condition occurrence. So now I'm just basically adding and documenting the inputs. And I can call this selected conditions of interest and run this template, and it will produce the results. Now, obviously, I can choose another. Code set. I think this code set is related to non-influenza pneumonia. So you can basically run the same code on different inputs, which is one of the purpose of templates, is to factor your code and be able to generalize it to other cases, depending on these parameters. Now, one thing I can do here is, while it's running, as you've noticed, in this template in particular, it's always the same. I can generalize it more. Concept set members is always is an input that is always needed, and it's always the same table. So I want to make this table imported automatically. And I also want to be able to run the same logic on different type of domain tables. So not just condition occurrence, but other domain tables. So let me go back to where I created my template. And in fact, you can also edit it from here. It doesn't matter which workbook you edit your template from. And so we're going to click on edit template. And let's make it a little bit more general. So the first thing I will do is I will make this concept set members. If I check this mark, I basically what this is saying is concept set members as a parameter will always be the same, and you should, as a data set, you should import it automatically to in my workbook if it's not already there. So that's one thing. And then for condition occurrence, let me rename this to something like domain table. And if you're familiar with OMOP, each domain table has a different way to refer to the concept ID column. So it's not going to be always condition concept ID. So say we're using measurements, the measurement table, the column will be measurement concept ID. So in order to support that, I'm going to create a new parameter, and let's call it concept ID column. And this is going to be a column, and the source data set is going to be my domain table, whichever domain table I'm using. It could be any column type. I think concepts IDs are texts, but let's keep it like this. And now I need to define my concepts, my parameter in the code. So I'm going to click on condition concept ID. And now, so this column name is going to be replaced by whatever input I have in this field, in this concept ID column field. So now I made some updates to my template. I can choose to release it and make it the default version. And what that means is whenever a user imports that template, they will import this updated version instead of version 0. And so if I click on update templates, now it's successfully updated. And I can maybe, let's actually delete these nodes and try to reuse, re-import the templates. So I'm going to click on new transform again. And let's look for, or it's actually already here, filter demo, filter to code set ID, and join with domain table. So I'm going to click select. Or actually, let me create a new workbook. For some reason, it didn't import my concept set members table automatically. And I think it has to do with the fact that the workbook was already in use. So new transform templates, and let's import our template. And now, as you can see, it automatically imported our concept set members table. We still need a domain table. So let's switch it up and use another domain table. Let me look for the measurement table as one of the other domain tables widely used. So I'm gonna select measurements. And now let's click on our template interface. So we have the concept set members input. Our domain table is going to be the measurement table. I have a concept ID, which is used for, I believe, blood counts. So I'm going to pass it here. And then for the column ID column, this is going to be measurement concept ID. And I think for some reason, it should be a dropdown. I think I didn't define this properly, but in any case, this is the concept ID column that in the case of measurement will be measurement concept ID. And let's call it measurement, let's call the output measurements of interest. And let's run this transformation. And so now what we're doing is we're using, if we click on toggle view, we're using the measurement table, and then we're using this code set ID that I've just input in this in here in this box, and we're joining with measurement table on this column, measurement concept ID. Now, so I've showed you how to create a template, how to import it and reuse it. Let's see the preview. You can have, you now see the results of your transformation. And I've also showed you how to update an existing template. Another thing I can show is how to create a multi-node templates. And for that, I'm going to continue using the same example. And let's say I'm interested in bringing some demographics to the records that I have here, namely the gender. So for that, let me import the person table, which is the table that has demographic data. So let's go to SimPuff, synthetic data, and import person. And what I'm trying to do here is define multiple steps, meaning multiple transformations, and make that make these multiple transformations as a package template that you can reuse. And so for that, let's just create first a transformation that joins my results to the person table to get the gender column. So let's write Python code, and let me paste this code in here. And so what I'm doing here is I'm doing a simple, I'm getting the gender concept name, which is basically the gender from the person table. And then I'm joining it with my my electronic health records, in this case, conditions on the person ID. So for each person on this data set, I am bringing the gender from the person table. So let's run this. And while it's running, let's create a template that performs this basic join. And let's call this template demo join with person to get gender column. And in this case, my template is going to take two parameters, my records and the person table. And the person table is always going to be the same input. So I'm going to persist it. And this will make it such that when you import this template, the person table will be uploaded automatically, will be imported automatically. So let's create this template, and I'm going to save it in the same folder. Now, as you can see in my workbook, I have two templates. The first step joins concept set filters concept set members to a specific code set ID and joins with a domain table on a specific concept ID column. The second step is to just join with the person table to get the gender column. And so in order to create what we call a multi-node template, I'm going to click on these two. I'm going to select these two templates and right-click, create a new template. And now, as you can see, this is an interface to create a template that has multiple steps. The first step is this one, selected pneumonia. And this is how I'm going to, and if I click on each one of the nodes, I can see the parameters that it's taking. So in this case here, I need to define these two inputs, input code set ID. So my input code set ID is going to be a parameter. So in this case, a variable, and it has a default value. And I also want to create a parameter for the concept ID column. So I click on create shared parameters, and I can configure it from the right-hand side here. So in my case here, it's going to be a column, and the source data set in this case is condition occurrence. So now that I've created this, now I just configured my multi-node templates. I can click on create. Let's give it a title. Filter to code set of interest, get EHR records, and get gender. We can add a description here, and let's create the template, the multi-node template. And now that I've created the template, let's test it again. So let me create a new workbook. Let's call it test multi-node template. And let's add the template. And I think the name of it was, if I click on it, filter to code set of interests. So I can start typing it here. And my template just showed up. So let's select it. And as you can see now, it imported the two-step templates that I have for the first one, which is getting the electronic health records of interest, I still need to import and define what my domain table is and what my concept ID column is. And for this one, it's kind of by default, so I just need to run it. So let's import, for example, the measurement table from the data catalog. And let's bring in the measurements here. And now the domain table is going to take measurement as input. And my concept ID column is going to be measurement concept ID. And now that I've defined this, I can run preview either step by step, or I think if I run the last step, you will run the previous step of the templates. But that's essentially how you import a multi-node template that you've defined. I think I went a little fast, so there's some error that needs to be fixed, but I think you get the idea that you can on how to create a multi-node template and how to import it and reuse it on a different workbook. So now that I've showed this, let's say you have some templates that you think could be of benefit to other Enclave users who are not necessarily within your research projects. One way to share knowledge is to contribute to the knowledge store. So if you go to the home page and click on the knowledge store, the knowledge store, and let me filter by code templates. This is a list of some templates that were created by different users and researchers within the platform, and they've been contributed. The templates were submitted to this knowledge store, so you can browse them here and reuse some of these templates. So, for example, this one, get COVID positive patient. You can click on the template, and then you'll have a description, and hopefully, if it's well documented, you'll have a README file. For some templates, you have code workbook templates, but you also have output data sets that are associated with the template. So you can choose to either import your template and run it from your workbook and reuse it, or you can choose to just start from the resulting data set if you trust the logic. I'm going to show you an example on how to reuse an existing template, and then I'll show you how to submit to the knowledge store. So let's say I'm looking at this sample persons, which is a template that was defined by Sean. And I think it simply is a sampling code. And so if you have a documentation here, but if I click on the shared logic, you can see the definition of the template. So it's taking a domain table parameter. It's taking a percent parameter, which is a number that has 5 as the default value, and a random seed. And if you click on code, you can see what the logic is. This is an R code. And if you want to use it, you can click on actions, and then you can click on using code workbook. And let me save this workbook in M3C training for the purposes of this demo. M3C training area. So now I've created a new workbook that has this template, sample persons, imported in here. And this one needs a domain table, so I can import an OMOP domain table and play with the inputs. And once I have the inputs, I can click on preview or run to produce the results. If I'm curious about what the template does, I can click on toggle view. and look at the underlying code. But I can also edit the template and create a new version of it. And that new version will not necessarily be the default version, but you can have a new version that you keep for yourself and that you run for yourself. So that's on how to use the existing templates from the knowledge store. The last piece of information I wanted to tackle was how to submit if you have a template that you want to contribute, that you want to share with the community, you can click on new knowledge objects. And this will take you to this form that is a submission form where you can pick your research project. This is for attribution purposes. In my case, this is just a demo, so I won't be picking any research project. And this is where you select your knowledge object. So knowledge object is oftentimes a code workbook template, but it could be something else like a data set or a report. Anything that is a resource within the enclave could be shared as a knowledge object. If I go to my N3C training area, and I would like to submit the template that I just created. I'm going to submit the multi-node template. So filter to code set of interests, get EHR records, and get gender. So it automatically imported the template. You have a link to the template in here, so you can open it and inspect it before submitting it. This is a multi-node template. So when you click, you won't have a code tab here, but you have multiple nodes. And each node is actually a template, a single template, so you can explore the code. You can add a description here. Obviously, the description is important for people to understand what the template is about, and it will be easier to use. If the template is using some of the domain tables, for example, in my case, it's using concepts and maybe it's using condition occurrence, I can tag that in here. This is more for documentation purposes, so people can understand what the scope of the template is. And there's also a knowledge object category. So we have phenotype templates. It could be visualization. If your template doesn't fit in any of these description, you can put it in uncategorized. And yeah, that's about it. When you click on submit knowledge object to the knowledge store, you'll have this message saying that the support team will reach out to you shortly to release the knowledge object in the knowledge store so that it can appear here. And we mostly want to make sure that it's well documented, that it's working well before releasing it in here. Yeah, I think that's about it. The last thing is documentation. On the knowledge store, if you click on the resources drop down here, one of the most of what I've talked about today is in this code workbook templates documentation. So this is a quick start guide that shows you how to create a new template or how to import an existing one, and also talks about the submission to the knowledge source. So feel free to refer to this. And obviously, if anything is unclear, if you still have issues or questions about how to use them, you can reach out to us. You can file issues, and we'll be happy to help.